So was the Eve Adams fiasco that train wreck that happened on Sunday when grassroots liberals decided to not endorse the hand-picked candidate of Justin Trudeau and instead go with their own local boy? Is that a one-day story, or are reverberations still happening throughout the Liberal Party and the political sphere? Ray Hurd is a longtime Politico. He joins me now from Toronto via Skype. And Ray, you've been, whether it's watching politics as a journalist or working on campaigns, you've got a pretty good idea of what's going on. Is this a one-day story or a multi-day story behind the scenes?
No, I think it was a revolt against Justin's leadership. Justin promised fair and open nominations, as you know, Brian. Most Canadians know that about him. And many other nomination meetings were not fair and open. And on Sunday, the vote was Sunday, in the morning, Justin and George Smitherman were both urging Liberals in that riding on the internet to vote. And I saw then, when Justin and Smitherman made this panicky appeal, I could see that Eve Adams was going down the tube. Now, the problem with Eve Adams is that Liberals know she's never been a Liberal. She's a drama queen. She should have a role in The Young and the Restless, because she's young relatively and she's very restless. So that's the problem. And I think that Justin, as always, was ill-advised. Now, you know, Brian, his chief advisor is a guy who was his college, university best friend, Gerald Butts, who is a green hysteric.
That's putting it mildly.
Yes, but Justin may have to get rid of Gerald Butts and push him aside, give him a huge new title.
There's lots of speculation about that, and I started getting phone calls and texts and questions about this Monday night saying, I hear there's a meeting, it's at a cottage, and Jerry Butts is on the way out. He's been shoved aside for David Hurley. Well, it's late Tuesday afternoon. We still don't have anything for sure on that, but there's speculation. So my feeling is that if something is happening inside Team Trudeau, I don't think he's going to throw his old university buddy overboard. I mean, he does owe him a great deal for his political career, helping him win the leadership, but I wouldn't be surprised if David Hurley is brought in for some adult supervision, maybe.
Well, David Hurley has a huge disadvantage, and he worked with me on the John Turner campaign. David Hurley was Paul Martin's thug and pit bull. He took out Sheila Copps, and he is one of the guys who dug Paul Martin's grave and then threw Paul in. That's the bad side of him. But what he did in the Ontario election, he managed the successful campaign of Kathleen Wynne.
Well, when she was mired in scandal and had no right winning anything.
And also, we forget one thing about that election was not really that David Hurley got Wynne to lose. Tim Hudak, the Tory, lost the election, and Wynne, advised by Hurley, did a reverse takeover of the NDP. I mean, I say Kathleen Wynne is a socialist Premier of Ontario. She taxes and she spends, but Hurley gets a lot of credit for doing what really was a no-brainer, because Hudak was self-destroying, and he did, and he's gone. And also, Horvath, the socialist NDP leader, was not proactive and assertive enough. So that's what Hurley's done.
Let's bring it back to federal politics. Let's bring it back to federal politics and the whole Eve Adams thing. Do you think that, the local grassroots people revolting against Eve Adams, do you think that caused panic? I mean, look, Trudeau has promised open nominations, but he hasn't delivered. Even if you are the leader of the party and you're calling in and saying, vote for this person, or sending all these signals, that's not really an open nomination. The Conservatives have had open nominations. Stephen Harper didn't get involved in Rob Anders' campaign. Rob lost. One of his cabinet ministers, Lynn Yelich, was just beaten in an open nomination. There was no involvement from Stephen Harper or his people in those campaigns.
Justin has thrown a lot of candidates he doesn't like under the bus. Christine Innes in the riding Olivia Chow wants to contest now. She was thrown under the bus by Justin. He demonized her and he blacklisted her. And guess what, Brian? She was punished for what her husband was alleged to have said to some young liberals whose names we don't know.
And so you do all these things, and eventually there is a grassroots backlash, and those grassroots, people can denigrate them, but they're the ones you need pounding in lawn signs, knocking on doors, making phone calls when the election comes.
But also, it's more than just the grassroots. What some people call ordinary Canadians, I call them extraordinary Canadians. It's also what the Liberal MPs are saying, as they did with Ignatieff. He got rid of his senior staff because they were no good, and he brought in a guy you and I know, Peter Donolo, too late to save him. So if Justin is smart, and I don't think he is particularly smart, unlike Harper or Mulcair, if Justin were a bit smarter, he would say, I've got to change the high command now, bring in Hurley. Hurley is a ruthless guy. You know, I won't say more, but he's one of the most ruthless people in Canadian political history. If he brought him in, Hurley could try to turn it around. But it's so late for Justin now because with the summer on, no one's paying any attention. And also, Harper is up in the polls. Mulcair looks like he's going to do very well. But I think, and I said this before, but I'll say it again, my concern is the odds are good. And God forbid this happen. I don't want it to happen. If there's an act of domestic terrorism, again in Canada or in the United States before the election, Harper's going to win because the issue would be Justin and Mulcair are soft on terrorism abroad and at home here in Canada.
Let me ask you about that as it relates to the Eglinton Lawrence nomination. The guy that won, Marco Mendocino, was a Crown prosecutor. He helped put some of the Toronto 18 crew behind bars. If you are constantly being depicted as being soft on terrorism by the Conservatives, isn't that the type of candidate that Justin Trudeau should have embraced and said, hey, look at this guy. He's great and he put bad guys behind bars, but even he says Harper's terrorism policies are awful. But he didn't do that.
The real issue is this, Brian. Why on earth did Justin Trudeau choose Eve Adams as a star candidate? I don't think anyone else that I know who's a Liberal agreed with that choice. And when she lost, it was a huge loss for Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. And in politics, you have to make up for your losses as quickly as you possibly can. So Justin has only a few weeks. If he changes the high command, Butts is a very provincial guy. He doesn't have a federal outlook. They're doing badly in Quebec. The Liberals, when you look at the polls, the Tories are probably going to improve. The Bloc will probably have 8 or 9 seats. So Justin is not going to do well in Quebec.
Well, he's going to keep the West Island of Montreal. He's going to do really well in Atlantic Canada and a smattering of seats in Ontario. If an election were called today, that's what I would predict. And then between Ontario and Vancouver, what, 3 MPs?
3, probably 1 in Saskatchewan, Ralph Goodale.
One or two in Manitoba, and there's nothing until you hit the coast.
But if there's no act of terrorism, and I don't want there to be an act of terrorism, but if there's no act of terrorism, given what the NDP did in the Texas of Canada, which is Alberta, that is one of the biggest political shocks. I've covered every prime minister, or have been involved with every prime minister, since Diefenbaker. And the NDP's victory with a majority in Alberta is the biggest surprise that I've experienced since 1962 in Canadian politics. So if that can happen, anything can happen. And when they go into the ballot box and when they cast their votes, Justin's biggest problem is a lot of Canadians who tell the pollsters they may vote Liberal, they're going to say subconsciously to themselves, Can we trust Justin Trudeau, who flip-flops all over the place, he's on two sides of the terrorism issue. He voted for the Anti-Terrorist Act,
and
but he voted against
taking
the
on
military
ISIS.
mission.
Yeah.
And do you know what that is like? Canada saying we're going to vote for World War II against Hitler and then refusing to fight Hitler. It's illogical. It's almost out of Monty Python. How can you make this stuff up, Brian?
Well, you can't sometimes, Ray. Truth is stranger than fiction. First Leaders Debate is next week. We could be in a campaign as early as this weekend. I think the writ's going to drop early, and it's going to be fascinating to watch, and I'll be calling you for sure. Thanks so much, Ray.
Okay, thanks.